Yeah, I'd say good day, everyone. It's so good to have you all joining us for another Dream Destination webinar. Tonight, we're featuring the Caribbean island of Hispaniola, and more to the point, the stunning country known as the Dominican Republic. This idyllic area is obviously well regarded as a prime beach holiday destination, but for birders, it holds many fabulous endemics and interestingly, several endemic bird families as well. And that, yeah, makes it a highly desirable place to visit. And to take us there today is rock jumper tour leader Bobby Wilcox. So Bobby's always been, just a little bit about Bobby. Bobby's always been an avid nature lover and conservationist and has a degree in geology. And before joining Rock Jumper, Bobby spent a lot of time working as a seasonal field technician surveying riparian songbirds along the Colorado River in western Arizona, banding birds out in California, Canada, and as far flung as American Samoa, and studying cavity nesters in northern Argentina, surveying vulnerable populations of sagebrush birds in Nevada's Great Basin, and monitoring critically endangered species like hooded grebes in the windswept Patagonian steppes. So Bobby's certainly been around and yeah, done some very interesting things bird related. He's also led multiple tours for Rock Jumper across the New World, including the Caribbean islands and the Dominican Republic, of course. And personally, I couldn't think of anyone better to showcase this fabulous destination for us with his wealth of experience in the area. As always, folks, questions are certainly welcome, and we'll usually deal with those at the end of the webinar during a Q&A session. So just feel free to send those through at any stage by the chat function. And yeah, as I say, we'll get to those later on. Or else maybe I'll just tap her up my tuna chat. We'll take it as they come. But yeah, that's all from my side. Bobby, the virtual floor is all yours.
All right, Keith, thanks for the virtual floor and thanks for that very gracious introduction. For those of you out there, I know, good to see you again. And for new folks, it's nice to meet you. So yeah, the Dominican Republic, I've spent a lot of time there the past couple of years. I think I just finished my fourth tour there this past February. So have got a lot of knowledge about the island, and hopefully we can impart some of that on you today and show you some cool birds. It's a really beautiful island. It's an interesting tour. It tends to be one of our more rigorous, strenuous tours, just in terms of the intensity of the travel. Not so much physical exertion as far as walking and things like that. Most of the birding we do is on roads, so it's relatively easygoing as far as that aspect of it. But we do move around a lot, and there's some quite early mornings, which is not something that's abnormal on a bird tour, but there's some very early mornings on this tour and some very rugged driving that occurs on those mornings that we try to build people up to as the tour rolls along. And but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we'll get started here. So we've got a broad-billed toady here just to start us off. One of the spectacular endemics that we'll see on the Dominican Republic, because it's quite a common species, so you don't need to go on the tour worrying that you're not going to see a toady. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry about that. So just to get started here, for you family listers out there, right, which I know there are quite a few of, this is one of the big reasons that people love to go to the Dominican Republic, because 5 out of the 7 Caribbean-only bird families exist on the Dominican Republic, and actually 3 of them are only on the Dominican Republic. The top line 3: the palm chat, the Hispaniolan tanagers, which includes the palm tanagers, which you see pictured there, and then also the green-tailed warbler and the white-winged warbler, and then the Chat-Tanagers. There's one of the palm tanagers, the gray-crowned palm tanager, which is only possible to see in Haiti, and for the obvious reasons, for those of you who follow the news, we don't really go there anymore, at least until they can kind of figure some things out with their government. But yeah, so this is a great tour for endemics in general, but also Caribbean and Hispaniolan specific families. So definitely a place to go to fill out that list. So here we just have a map of the island just to give you a general overview. Kind of you cut a line right down the middle there, and to the right of that is the Dominican Republic. To the left is Haiti. So all of this is just screenshotted from my eBird trip report. So all of the blue and red little marks there are where I've done a checklist. So that gives you kind of an idea of what the spread of the tour is. So we start off in Santo Domingo, and then we actually head north, and then we come back through Santo Domingo and go all the way to this western corner where you see lots of dots. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit more as we go on. So the general idea here is I'm going to kind of go through the tour day by day and just kind of give you an overview of some of the birds we generally see in each area we spend a day in, and just give you, and that's kind of how we're going to arrange things here. So let's see. So getting started. So there's Santo Domingo where we begin the tour, and our first stop on morning one. Actually, I should say it's cool because when we arrive in Santo Domingo, we stay in the colonial zone, which is kind of the old portion of the city. Santo Domingo is a very historic city. It's the first city settled by the Spanish in the New World. So as you go around Santo Domingo, you see many first ofs. The first, one of the places we visit is the first hospital in the New World. The first this, that, and the other thing is all over the place. But it's quite a beautiful city, and the colonial zone is very, kind of European influenced. Lots of beautiful old buildings, colorful buildings, lively, vibrant plazas and things like that. It's quite a fun place to hang out, and that's where our hotel is. And we spend multiple nights in Santo Domingo, and our hotel is there. We go to some nice restaurants in the city, so it's quite a nice way to break up the tour. So moving on, our first stop on the tour is a lovely botanical garden in the middle of Santo Domingo. So palm chat is the national bird. They're quite charismatic, gregarious. They build these massive stick nests. They're kind of colonial nests, and you'll just see dozens of them in the park. They're all over the place. They're quite easy to see, and you get to see them going in their nests, doing all their different vocalizations. They have a very distinctive alarm call that they use for raptors. We'll also see a lot of like Antillean palm swifts around there. They nest in the palm trees in the park. Hispaniolan woodpecker. Within a minute of walking into the park, we'll already be seeing a handful of endemics. This being one of them. One of, if not the most beautiful endemic woodpeckers in the Caribbean. I'd probably put it at the top of my list. It's quite spectacular, and these guys are all over the place, loud, and here we can see one's exploring a cavity. Vervain hummingbird. So this is not an endemic. The vervain also occurs on Jamaica, but it is a Caribbean endemic. Supposedly the second smallest hummingbird in the world. It's similar in size to like a wood star, basically. If people have done South American birding, it's quite a tiny little guy, and oftentimes we'll see them. They perch way at the top of a tree on the spike that goes off the top of a palm tree, and they'll sing from there. So that's often the first look we get at one. And then you usually see them better at a flower or something like that. But they're adorable little guys, and this is probably the best place to see them. We'll see them other places as well, but this place is the easiest place to see them. Two of the cuckoos on the island are most common and easily seen here in the park. We tend to get good looks at both of these. The mangrove cuckoo, which is not endemic again, but it's a nice one to see because it can be difficult to see in a lot of places, and it's quite easy generally to see in the park here. They are kind of widespread throughout the Caribbean, coasts of Central America, but sometimes it can be a very difficult bird to see, so it's nice to get good looks at here. And then of course the endemic Hispaniolan lizard cuckoo, all of the big islands in the Caribbean basically have their own lizard cuckoo. And as I, as I like to tell the guests at the beginning of the tour, most of the birds, the endemic birds, are Hispaniolan something. So If I only say lizard cuckoo, that means it's Hispaniolan, and that applies to a whole bunch of different things. So just to shorten things a little bit, that's the kind of the disclaimer I give at the beginning of the tour. Black-whiskered vireo, this is just a common one. This is common throughout the island, but it's kind of one of the first birds we'll see at the park and just kind of a nice intro bird. It's also mostly a Caribbean bird. And this is a good place to get really nice looks at. They tend to be very common, singing vociferously in the park, and they're all over the place. But this will be one we see throughout the tour. West Indian whistling duck. This is a specialty of. I mean, they're around the island, but the park here is a really nice place to see them. It's one of the best places in the whole Caribbean to get really nice close looks at them. As you can see down by its scientific name there, I put its threat category, IUCN, and it's a near threatened bird, so they're on the verge of being endangered, and they're definitely uncommon. So I don't think I've ever missed them at the park here. There's usually a place where there's a congregation of them, a little Japanese garden. So as you can see, this photo was taken there. So they're quite tame, and you can get pretty close to them. They're kind of like pond ducks, but they are native. They're not like introduced there and wings clipped or anything like that. So Hispaniolan parakeet, one of the two endemic cetaceids on the island. These guys tend to be also quite common in the park. Tend to get pretty good looks at them there. So, and then moving on from the park, this is a stop that we try to do on the tour, and hopefully we get some time on one of our trips back and forth through Santo Domingo if we have a few minutes. This is a nice one because there's actually like a nest colony of the Hispaniolan parakeets here. So if we don't get good looks at the botanical garden, we can come here and this is an old ruin of as I was saying before, the first hospital built in the New World, and it's just filled with old cavities and stuff in the walls. You can see in the picture there a couple parrots vying for supremacy of a nesting cavity with a rock pigeon, but there's dozens and dozens of parakeets here. It's fun to just go here and hang out and watch them fly around and argue with each other. So that's basically that's actually really the first morning of the tour is in the botanical garden. Then we immediately start heading to the north side of the island to get to the Los Haitises National Park. So we're in Santo Domingo here. We head west to San Pedro de Macorís, the ancestral homeland of famous Chicago Cub Sammy Sosa and many other professional baseball players. We'll pass many baseball like training facilities on the way there. Baseball's huge in Dominican Republic, as many of you may know. And one of the games we like to play in the bus is trying to identify as many Major League Baseball team ball caps as we can. And it's kind of fun. I think one of my tours we got all of them. So good game. Pass the time. So then this is where we end up on day one, and this is where we spend the night at a hotel in the park here, which is this photo. So this is the coolest accommodation by far on the tour, and so this was, if I'm not mistaken, it's the property is owned by an architect, and he designed and built this whole complex. And there's actually two different hotels, but this is the one we stay in, the Altos de Cañondo. And it's just a really spectacular building. It's built mostly with different pieces of limestone rock from the immediate area. So it's kind of this cool concrete structure with just these random bits of limestone embedded in the walls all over the place. There's no, like, the towel hangers in the bathrooms are just chunks of limestone sort of emerging from the wall. It's a very sort of feels like a living building. It's quite fun. And it's like Hogwarts or something. It's just crazy labyrinth of staircases inside to So it's not a favorite of people who have trouble walking up and down stairs, but aesthetically it's very cool. And definitely it's the type of place you wish you could stay more than one night, but alas, we cannot. So going into the park, so this is where we go to see Ridgway's hawk. And Ridgway's hawk is one of the most, it's an endangered endemic hawk. That's one of the most important birds to see on this tour. And this is basically the only place you can see it anymore. So the park is, this kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. These limestone mogotes, which are like these sort of large spire-like hills. It's karstic limestone, so there are a lot of caves in there, and it's sort of these large rock formations that are punctuated by these very flat valleys, which are often used as pasture land. And what that also means, because this is the rainiest part of the island, is that sometimes if you get a huge amount of rain, these areas can get flooded. And this is a situation we ran into on tour where we just had a massive dump of rain the day before. And, the next morning we're like, oh, we're going to go out and walk in the pastures and look for the hawk. And that plan was quickly thwarted by this massive moving pond that was going through the area we were hoping to walk through. So that didn't happen, but luckily we had seen the hawk the previous day in the parking lot. So the hawks are around there, and we have a really awesome local guide there who spent many years working with the Peregrine Fund, who has put in a ton of work trying to help rehabilitate the hawks, bring the population back up to a sustainable level. And this guy, Juan, he's a local guy, and he's a legend out there. He's, him and his son have worked there for years, climbing up in the nests to ban the hawks, injecting with medicine to keep away bot flies, doing all kinds of crazy stuff to keep these birds viable. So it's pretty cool getting to hang out with him and have him help us find the hawks. And the aforementioned hawk right here. It's a really pretty little hawk, kind of for those of the listeners from the United States. It's quite similar. There are certain populations of red-shouldered hawk in appearance. And we generally tend to get pretty good looks at the bird. There's a number of known territories that are near the hotel there. So we go out with Juan, and he wanders off into the woods and shortly thereafter digs up a Ridgway's hawk for us. But you can see on the left bird, it's got a very noticeable band there. Pretty much all of the adult birds, or most of them, are banded, and I think that they try to band as many of the young birds as they can as well. So there tends to be a regular pair around there. One of the other sort of specialties, not really exactly a specialty, these guys can be found all over the island, but we tend to see them the best here at Los Haitises, is the white-necked crow. If you're into corvids, this is a really cool one. I love this bird. This is one of my favorite birds on the trip. You can see on the right photo, I just managed to get the white neck there. That's the only time you really see it, is when it flares its feathers like that, when it's calling or agitated or something. But they're just really spectacular birds. They're kind of like raven-size crows with that piercing red eye, and they just the array of sounds they make is just really spectacular. And they're always right around the lodge making a bunch of crazy gurgles and squawks, and they're a lot of fun to listen to. Antillean piculet. We'll get our first looks at this one here at Los Haitises. It's kind of a weird little woodpecker. They're actually not. It's a much larger than South American piculets, maybe the size of like a downy woodpecker or something like that for you US people. But they're actually not closely related to any South American or any Western Hemisphere woodpecker, really. They're much more closely related to Eastern Hemisphere woodpeckers. So who knows how he ended up here, but we'll usually get nice looks at them around the lodge here, and we'll see them in other places too, but this is a good place to get good looks at them. And that's an endemic, should point out, as is the hawk, obviously. Louisiana water thrush I just threw in here, not an uncommon bird, but it's one that this is a really good place to see it, and probably the only place on the island that we'll see it. And for a lot of people, if we get people from the Western US, this tends to be a fun bird that they don't get to see very often. So this one we see here in the little creeks and rivers that flow through the valleys. Stolid flycatcher, another kind of regional endemic. Actually, they only occur in Jamaica and Hispaniola. So they're quite abundant around here. Kind of your garden variety Myarchus flycatcher, just relatively drab brown with some rufous tones and some lemony yellow wash. But they are a Caribbean endemic. Hispaniola and mango, one of the 3 regularly occurring hummingbirds on the island. They tend to be very common around this area. You see them all over the place chasing each other. And nice looking bird. This was recently split. This used to be Antillean mango until, was it last year? One of the last 2 years. It was part of a split from, so it's now Hispaniola and Puerto Rican mango, was formerly this Antillean mango. So very recently new Hispaniola endemic. So that's nice. Plain pigeon, again, kind of a Caribbean endemic, if I'm not mistaken, and also something that's becoming more and more difficult to see. And I would say that Dominican Republic is one of the better places to see it. We tend to see them at least flying over here, but as you can see here, like we often will get really nice looks at them perched in trees too. But this can be a really tough bird to see. And some tours we just barely get glimpses of it. Others we get really nice looks, but they're sort of losing ground and becoming more and more difficult to see on throughout their entire range. Okay, so moving on. So you look up to kind of the top center of the screen, Sabana de la Mar is where we just were, and we'll be heading back to Santo Domingo for a night. And then the next morning we head to this area on the lower left-hand corner, the Salinas de Bani, which it's kind of like a large salt pan complex. And there's also like a dune complex there. And it's a national monument. So there's a mangrove forest. And so there's some specialties there, one of them being the yellow warbler. Sorry about that. Just somebody popping in the office for a second. So the yellow warbler, technically the mangrove warbler. This one is kind of a complex taxonomic deal where the birds we see here, basically, I won't go into the hyper specifics of it, but essentially it's yellow warbler, and different taxonomies treat it differently. This one is according to IOC, part of the mangrove complex. So these guys are local breeders. They breed in the mangroves. We'll hear them singing, counter singing, doing breeding type of things, which is basically the best way to distinguish it from the migrant yellow warblers. And as you can see, they look pretty similar. There's a wide array of plumage variation in this complex, with some mangrove warblers having an entirely rufous head. These ones having almost no rufous in them. So it's a tough one, but we see a lot of them here. Easy to see, tough to taxonomize, if that's a word. Greater Antillean bullfinch, one of the few tanagers, members of the tanager family we'll see on this tour, but a nice Caribbean endemic. Tends to be common in these sort of mangrove areas. You can see the male on the left there and the female on the right. It's a really nice bird with a pretty song as well. American flamingo is a nice one that we tend to see in this area, amongst other waders. I didn't add pictures of all the other waders. This is an area we spend a lot of time in the salt pans. So the flamingo is kind of the big important one that we're looking for here, and then we'll just try to sort of pad the trip list with tons of other, all kinds of different herons, basically all of them, tricolored, little blue, reddish egret, all the big easy herons. Sometimes we get roseate spoonbill here, handful of different tern species, lots of shorebirds depending on the day, of all different varieties, maybe 10, 12 species or so. Well, so we spend some time here just scanning these salt pans where people actually still mine salt, and or precipitate salt rather from the seawater. And there's these little trains that go through on these little tracks and little berms that go through the salt pans where they put the salt in little carts and drive around in these trains. So it's kind of fun. Occasionally see like a brown booby, lots of magnificent frigate birds because we're right on the ocean here. Clapper rail. This is another one here in the mangroves. This is a Caribbean subspecies, kind of duller plumage than your typical East Coast of the U.S. clapper rail. I don't think this one's in danger of being split anytime soon, but it is a local subspecies, and you never know. We tend to get pretty good looks at these guys. Just to throw this in here, this is a really good area for lizards. Not all of these are necessarily seen here, but just wanted to mention that this is can be a pretty good trip, not for herps in general, but lizards. There's a lot of endemic lizards on Dominican Republic. The rhinoceros iguana is a really cool one that we do see here, and they are endangered, but the Bani area is kind of one of their major strongholds. And there's kind of a military base there, and they hang out right at the entrance. So it's like you can't miss them. You're not going to go to Dominican Republic and not see a rhinoceros iguana, but unfortunately they are still in danger, and they have issues with kind of interbreeding with introduced green iguanas. So that's kind of a big problem, but we do get to see them, and they're a lot of fun. And then a couple other cool lizards that we see on the trip, the Barahona giant anole, and the common stout anole is one of the more common ones that we'll see in different places. But we've seen, I don't know, there's probably a half a dozen at least species that are semi-regularly seen on tour. All right, moving on then. So now we're kind of in that big southwestern, not really peninsula, but point area, and this is where we're going to spend the rest of the tour. So we kind of head from Bani. You can see a little town there called Paraíso. That's where we go pick up our expert local guide Ephraim. And I should have mentioned our other expert local guide, Manny, who may or may not be watching right now. He may have had to attend to a crying child or something, but he's out there somewhere. Manny's awesome. All the local guides in Dominican Republic are awesome. We're really lucky with the ground people that we work with there. And it just really enhances the experience, the local knowledge that they have, and birds and otherwise. It's great. So Paraíso is a beautiful little coast town. We pick up Ephraim, and then we head on to this little town right in the center of your screen. It should be Pedernales, which is right on the border of Haiti. There's the arrow. And that's where we spend our next night in a little hotel there in town. And then the following morning, we head up into the mountains here via a really nice road. It's an old bauxite mine, which is a mineral they use to extract aluminum from. And so it's a beautiful road. It doesn't take that long to get up there, but we go up there in the morning to this gorgeous, like, montane pine forest. It's a really spectacular habitat. Here's a picture of one of my groups there. There's Manny on the left. And kind of get an idea of what it looks like. It's just, I mean, it just looks like your standard pine forest in Arizona, Colorado, whatever. It's nice and crisp up there in the morning. You can smell the pines. It's a really nice morning, and some really great birds up there, the Sierra de Bahoruco. First off in the morning, the Hispaniola and palm crow. There's a little campsite there where these guys come in and hope to get some leavings from various campers. So we go there, have breakfast, wait around, and they almost always show up and make a big ruckus. This is another one that was recently split into Hispaniolan and Cuban palm crow. It used to be, I can't remember, Antillean palm crow, something like that. Black crowned palm tanager, one of our endemic families. These guys tend to be, they're common throughout the tour. Tend to get nice looks at them up here, but other places too. It's quite one of the more common endemics we'll see during the tour. But beautiful bird. Pine warbler, this is a cool one. A local, a disjunct breeding population, or year-round sedentary population of pine warblers, so non-migratory. So they just live up here in the pine forest. I don't know if it was something where they got stranded during the last ice age, down here, or if it was a migrant population that just decided, hey, here's a nice patch of pine forest. Why are we going all the way to Maryland or something? Let's just hang out here. So either way, it's cool. They're singing all throughout the forest all morning, and so it's just kind of an interesting bird to have there. Something that most of us North American birders think of as purely a migrant, but Antillean siskin, one of the birds that we hope to see up here in the pine forest, and generally we do. You know, every day is a little bit different, but generally this can be a excuse me, a good area to see these guys. Male on the left, female on the right. Hispaniola and crossbill. This is definitely one of the the big hot shots on the tour. This is the one that we don't want to miss. I've never missed Hispaniola and crossbill. And this tends to be a really good place to see them. There's an old, it's kind of like a concrete basin that the old mining operations used to store water in, I guess. And a lot of the birds will come there in the morning. There's actually a little like cattail marsh that's grown up in there. There's always a common yellow-throat in there. And a lot of the birds tend to come into this area. So most of the time we go up there, we spend a decent amount of time hanging out here. And this is the place where I've gotten by far the best looks at the crossbills. Sometimes they come right down to the water and you just get spectacular views of them. So that's definitely something we hope for. Sometimes golden swallows, another bird I'll talk about later, will fly over here. Okay, Greater Antillean Alania, again, Caribbean endemic. There's one here, and then another subspecies on Jamaica. This is actually a probable future split. So this is one that is relatively easy to see here, although we'll see it other places as well, but definitely a bird that we try to make sure we get, because this is one that very well could be split in the future. Okay, so those are some of the the big ones there. So from Pedernales, we will continue on. So let's see. So all of these places so far have been only one-night stays. So it's a short trip on a small island, but we're really moving around a lot. So from Pedernales, we go, actually, first we go, if you look just a little bit south of Pedernales, we go to a little place called Cabo Rojo, which is kind of another mangrove beach area. We spend a little bit of time there, although unfortunately there's been a big like hotel development that's sort of grown up there with a new airport and stuff, and they're kind of trying to turn it into the next Punta Cana, like a big resort area. So really losing a lot of habitat there, and it's probably a place that we're going to have to axe from the tour relatively soon, because it's just becoming not worth it to go there. But there's a little lake a little south of there called Oviedo, which has some of the same birds, and we can go there instead. But anyway, heading back up the coast, we spend the night a little further up the coast from this arrow, not in Paraiso, but a different place, a really nice hotel right on the coast there. And then we head up into the mountains the following morning in 4x4s to Cachote, which is just a kind of the name of the general area up there. It's actually a national monument that has a much longer name. But so on the way up there, we'll try for ashy-faced owl if we haven't already seen it in Los Haitises. But we tend to, the last couple of tours, we tend to have really good luck on this road. And as you can see from here, I've gotten spectacular views of it. This tends to be a good place for it. We know a good spot for them. Beautiful owl, Tito, like a barn owl, really quite spectacular. This is a big one. This is white-fronted quail-dove. This is one of the marquee birds of the tour, and actually this was my last tour in February. It was my fourth visit to Dominican Republic, and this was the first time I'd seen this bird. So this is a tough one, although the place we go up here is a little kind of like a homestead up in the mountains. That's this guy, he's kind of one of our local guys named Ramon, and he's great. He's a super nice guy, and he has started he feeds his chickens out in the woods, and in the process of doing that discovered that the quail doves come in and eat the corn that he feeds the chickens. So now we have it's not ironclad, but it's like a really good chance to see the white-fronted quail dove and get really spectacular looks at it, as well as ruddy quail dove. So it's we're really lucky to have Ramon up there and to be able to see this bird now with relative ease, because it used to be extremely difficult. to see. So this is super cool. Hispaniola spindalis, another common one. Actually, surprisingly tends to be a somewhat difficult bird to see sometimes. We always see it, but you don't always get great looks at it. As you can see, this photo is not, most of these photos are my photos, but I still haven't managed to get a good one of this bird, so I had to use Duchamp's. But this one we see up in this area quite often. This is kind of like a cloud forest area up here. So it's a lot of stuff. We only have a short time up there, but Hispaniola and emerald tend to be pretty common up in this area. This is the other endemic hummingbird on the island, so should get good looks at it in this area, if not other places. And the bird that we, aside from the quail-dove, this is the other bird that we come to this spot specifically for, because it's the only place really in this part of the island that's easily accessible where you can see eastern Chat-Tanager. So we got to get it here. So this is a really important place that we hope that this morning's not rainy, and we tend to have pretty good luck. You can tell from the quality of the photo that this is the looks you tend to get at it. But I used this photo specifically so people didn't think that you were going to get spectacular face melting, frame filling photos of this bird. It tends to be very obscured, but Ramon knows this area really well, and you know we almost always find it. So okay, so from Cachote we head through. Oh, we kind of work our way up this little highway towards the arrow there and to a little town of Duvergé. So basically we're getting to the last 2 nights of the tour here. So Duvergé is the only place where we spend 2 nights on the tour. And it's a little kind of weird apartment complex within the town. This area of the country. It's kind of difficult to find. It's not a tourist area really, so it can be hard to find places to stay. But we've managed to pull that off here, and it's a nice little town. There's a nice restaurant that we go to and eat most of our meals, and we've kind of over the last couple of years, I've developed a really efficient system that I'm super proud of to keep the tour flowing in there. Because unfortunately, it's about a 45-minute drive from Duvergé to where we go birding, so we have to be super efficient about our meals. But we've trained this restaurant really well to anticipate our needs and have done a lot with, like, you know, taking meals out in the field. Last tour, even like we ordered pizzas ahead of the time and took them out in the field so we could do some extra night birding that we weren't planning on. And it tends to work out really well. They're nice folks and they help us out a lot. So from Duvergé, you can see a whole bunch of little blue dots, you know, moving off to the west there. And we do a lot of birding in this area over the course of 2.5 days or so in different areas. So check out some of those. So the first place we kind of explore is these xeric, which is just a fancy biologist way of saying dry scrub forests near Puerto Escondido, which is a little town in there, where we also pick up one of our hyper local guides, Rafael, who's also awesome and knows this area really well. It's a really good birder, nice guy. So we pick him up in his house, and then we go out and bird. Basically, it's a lot of road birding. There's a little bit of trails. As you can see, these folks are on a trail, but we do mostly road birding in here through these cool, dry thorn scrub forests. It's a lot of interesting cacti, a lot of hanging moss. You can see even this photo on the left side, it's kind of a tree cacti. I don't know if it's like a cacti epiphyte or something, but it's a really cool vegetation, especially if you're into desert vegetation. It's a cool spot in here, and lots of interesting birds. One of which being the Hispaniola and Amazon. This photo is maybe a little bit misleading. We don't usually tend to get such good looks at them. Often they'll be flying over and sometimes perched far away, but you never know. It's always possible. But this tends to be a pretty good area for them. This is the other obviously endemic parrot on the island. Key West Quail-Dove is one that we hope to see here on typically we'll do some forest trails in here. There's some areas where you kind of move out of the scrub forest and you get some bigger like a higher canopy, more like broadleaf forest. And some of these trails tend to be good. You can see the white-fronted quail-dove in here as well. But hopefully we've already seen that, and then we'll kind of focus on seeing Key West quail-dove, which is another obviously spectacular dove. Localized in the Caribbean. Yeah, you can only see it on a couple islands, and they tend to be pretty difficult to see, but this is one that we have a decent chance of getting looks at in this area. Hispaniola and peewee. All the Caribbean islands got to have their own peewee, and probably not everybody's most memorable bird of the tour, but it is an endemic, and they're out there. So peewees are cool. No offense to peewees, but yeah, they like this dry forest. We'll probably see them other places as well, but this is a good spot where you often see quite a few of them. Flat-billed vireo, the one and only endemic vireo in Hispaniola. I'm not sure if its bill is really flatter than other vireos. This is the area where we usually see them. They tend to be pretty common along the road walks we do here. Loggerhead kingbird. This is a not an endemic, although this is one of those like probable future split candidates. There's it's this kind of a complex throughout the Caribbean. And there's very distinct kind of, I think Cuba and Jamaica have like a distinct form, and then Dominican Republic, or rather Hispaniola, and then Puerto Rico have their own distinct forms. This guy is a little bit more rufous, kind of a little bit browner tones than some of the gray tones you see on some of the other loggerhead kingbirds. They all have very different vocalizations. So this is one that I imagine in the future will get split into 3 or 4 different species. And we see them in this area at lots of different elevations, but down in the lowlands here, where we'll kind of try for them first. Finally, the toadies. This is what everybody comes here for, and with good reason. They're spectacular and adorable, and they're just super cool birds. And like I said, you don't have to worry about not seeing toadies. We'll definitely see toadies. The broad-billed is the much more common one. It's a more of a lowland bird. The separation between the two, I should go back there a second. So Hispaniola is the only island that has 2 endemic toadies, the broad-billed and the narrow-billed. And they tend to be separated mostly by elevation, maybe slightly habitat, but primarily it's elevational. So this area is the only place that we go on tour where you can theoretically see both of them in the same place. So here's the broad build. This depending on what size your screen is, that's probably much bigger than in real life. Maybe twice the size of the actual toady. They're super tiny. They tend to be very active and oftentimes quite gregarious. The broad bill at least will come out right in the open and pose for you. So we'll see a lot of these. The main difference is the eye color being the iris being brown and the lower mandible being totally orange. And we'll see the narrow bill in a minute and can hopefully tell the difference. Hispaniola and Euphonia. This is another one of the big ones. Exciting to get. Actually, technically a Chlorophonia, but either way, quite a spectacular bird. And this can be a tough one. I don't think I've gone on tour without seeing it, but sometimes it's the last endemic we see. So they're they can be kind of nomadic and just kind of hard to stumble across sometimes, but usually end up getting pretty decent looks at it, even if it's down to the wire. This is also another recent split from the Puerto Rican. I think it used to be Antillean Euphonia. Now it's Hispaniolan and Puerto Rican. Golden swallow, I apologize for this photo. It's terrible. It looks like it was an AI generated photo or something, but it's a tough bird to get a photo of. This was during a day on the most recent tour where sometimes this bird is extremely hard to see. I've seen it on every tour, but the first tour was the very last bird we saw, and we were driving down the mountain. It was all the clouds were settling in, and it was the last day we had to get back to Santo Domingo, and all of a sudden the car in front of us stopped and Raphael jumped out and he somehow pulled two golden swallows out of the ether. And this last tour we had much better luck. We had big flocks of them just streaming across back and forth across the road above us in this Puerto Escondido area. So it was really nice to get good looks at them, get to see all their colors. It's a really spectacular swallow with the greens and kind of golden green and blues. It looks like if you're a North American bird or a mix of a tree swallow and a violet green swallow. But they're quite beautiful and sadly quite difficult to get photos of, as this very strange looking photo is evidence of, but it gives you the idea at least. There's a lot of bad post processing that went on there. So this is the area where we do the most night birding. Depending on how lucky we are, we might do multiple nights out here in this scrub forest. So um, the two main birds we're looking for are least parake, which is this one, and the Hispaniola nightjar, which I do not have a photo of. So uh, we just spend some time out there doing some playback and typically between our nights out there and then driving up the mountain to our final spot, we get decent looks at these birds. Common potu, or sorry, northern potu is also one that we'll be looking for out there. On some tours, we've found roosting Chuck-Will's widows, which is cool. That's they're a winter resident, a migrant down there. So that's not common, but it's certainly possible. And I think that Efrain, our local guide, has said he's heard him vocalize too, so or had him respond to playback. So that's a possibility. But mainly we're going for these endemics, the least parake and the Hispaniola nightjar. Hispaniola and Oriole. I almost forgot about you. This is another one that can be one of the harder birds. It's a strange tour. It's like every tour there's one that you think is going to be easy and then it's just super difficult. The Oriole has been that one for me multiple times and sometimes it's easy, but it's this can be one of the harder birds to find. We always do, but it's one that you would think would be more common, but is actually sometimes pretty difficult to see. But nice looking Oriole, as most of them are. And this is a good area to see them. Actually, in the trees right by the apartment complex we stay in is often the place we find them, just hanging out in the parking lot before going out in the field and doing playback. And sometimes you'll get a pair that just comes right in. I just threw this in here um just to say that we are doing a lot of like migrant birding and Hispaniola tends to be really good for migrant North American um, uh, warblers. So this is just kind of an array of some of the most typical ones we see: American redstart, Cape May, black and white, black-throated blue, prairie, northern pruel. These tend to be generally the most common ones. We'll see black-throated greens, palms, myrtle warblers tend to be fairly common in certain places, ovenbird, um, northern water thrush maybe. So there's a whole array of different ones that we could see, and that's something that we're just kind of always, have our eyes out for, and just something that's nice to see to fill in the gaps when the other birding is slow, because there's usually some warbler activity, excuse me, happening. So that's always nice, and especially if you're a lot of these are Eastern specific warblers. So if we get people from, well, certainly people from other parts of the world, but people from the Western US who don't get to see a lot of these guys, it can be a lot of fun to get to see some of these warblers that aren't everyday warblers for them or every day during migration. Oh, this one. So this is the best look you're likely to get at a Hispaniola and Solenodon, which is one of the few endemic mammals on the islands. And yeah, yeah, you just don't really see them. But if you get lucky and see them, that's an amazing coup to be able. I think even our local guides have only seen them less than a handful of times in life. So and you basically have to go. You have to hire somebody special to go out at night and try to find them. At one tour, we did see the other mammal, the utia. It's another kind of a large arboreal rodent. These guys are not rodents. They're kind of, as you can see, they're sort of like opossums, but they're part of their own family. It's a very ancient lineage. But yeah, I put it in there. Everybody loves the sign though, so you got to take a picture of the sign. But alas, seeing one in real life is not super common. Okay, so that kind of takes care of that lower area where you can see the first series of blue dots there up in that where it says Parque Nacional Sierra de Bahoruco. So the last day of the tour is an intense one. So we start off in Duvergé about 3:30 in the morning, and we drive into Puerto Escondido, which is about 45 minutes. And then Rafael and some of his compatriots who have some serious four-wheel drive vehicles, we switch into their cars from our bus, pile in tight, and then we start our long, arduous, fairly unpleasant drive up to what is definitely the best birding in the country, probably, and the place that you have to go to get most of the great things. But it's definitely turns the tour into an adventure, and it's fun. It's not pleasant while you're doing it, but I think everybody agrees by the end that it's worth it. And so yeah, but the road is barely definable as a road. It's basically just a boulder strewn creek bed that for half of it, and then it does turn into a proper road, but it also is it's bad. It's a bad road. That's really all I can say. It's hard to describe how bad it is until you've experienced it. But it takes about 2.5 hours because we want to get up there pre-dawn so we can get up there, have our breakfast, and that's so that if we start there, we head up there. It's a very short distance, but it takes a long time. So this is something we actually see on the way down. This is just a kind of an interesting illustration of the difference in the quality of forest from Dominican Republic, where I've taken the picture into Haiti, so you can see the extreme desolation and deforestation that has occurred there, where there's just nothing left, And whereas on the Dominican side where we're standing, there's kind of like a border patrol station there, and it's just gorgeous, pristine. I mean, there's some sort of subsistence farming going on out there, but for the most part in this area, especially in the national park, it's just beautiful, pristine, sort of montane broadleaf forest transitioning up into cloud forest, and it's really quite nice. But in Haiti, it's just nothing left, Kind of sad, but it's interesting to see nonetheless. Sometimes there's a introduced northern bobwhite singing from across the border. So as I was saying, we get up to the very top, well, not the very top, the top for us, where we stop along the road in a place called Zapoten, which is kind of just a name for the general area up there in the national park. And this is one of our big targets up there, the Lascelles thrush. And so you have to get there before dawn, and you just wait. And eventually, as dawn breaks and the light starts to increase, the Lascelles will come out, hopefully, and start hopping along the road. And usually this happens, and you don't always get looks this good. This was a magical moment where we just had one hopping in front of the trail 5 meters ahead of us, and it just didn't care that we were there, So we're getting amazing photos and amazing looks, and but it's not always this easy. This can be a really tough bird, and it's not seen. Sometimes it's not seen at all. Sometimes it's just barely seen 100 meters up on the trail. So it's a tough one, and some of the birds up here are. But We also hope to see Bicknell's thrush up here. This is one of the major wintering strongholds for Bicknell's thrush, which is I don't know if it's endangered. It's in that near threatened endangered range for sure, but they have a very small breeding range in a New England area, and then this is probably an easier place to see them. But yeah, we usually tend to see Bicknells down here. I don't have a photo, sadly. Hispaniola and Trogon, this is one. So this whole area, Zapoten, is just, the birding's insane up here. It's just, once dawn hits, I mean, it's just nonstop for the first hour or so. It's just kind of like mixed flocks here, mixed flocks there, like new. I mean, and usually we're down, people are worried when we come here because, we're like, oh God, we still need to get 8 endemics, and how are we going to do it? And you realize pretty quickly once you get to Zapoten that it's you should have trusted me when I told you a few days ago that don't worry, we'll get them, because you almost always get them up here. And it's just such a great birding spot. So the Trogon tends to be one of the ones that's pretty common up here. We'll usually have seen it previously, but probably get better looks at it up here. We got the female on the left and the male on the right. The male has the kind of stripy wing coverts and tertials there, whereas the female is just sort of a bronzy colored. But beautiful bird, one of the only two endemic trogons in the Caribbean, along with the Cuban trogon. There's our second toady, narrow-billed toady. So you can see this little guy has got kind of this bluish white iris as opposed to the darker brown, and then only half of its lower mandible is that orange color that you saw covering the whole lower mandible of the broad-billed toady. So these are not these pictures illustrate it pretty well. That's not to say that it's an easy thing to see in the field, although once we're up at this elevation, narrow bill tends to be the only one there. So you don't really have to think too hard about it. And they also have quite different vocalizations. So that's the other way, obviously, to tell them apart. But yeah, once we're up here, we've gotten out of broad build range. So it's all narrow build. But these guys are a little bit more skulky, tend to be a little bit harder to see than broad build. But we always get a look at them. Rufous Road Solitaire is a spectacular one. Caribbean endemic, not Hispaniolan, but a few different subspecies. Really beautiful, eerie, sort of like whistled songs that they do in the morning, kind of like a long whistle on the same pitch, and then it drops and they do another one on a different pitch. And it's sort of like the constant background soundtrack of the cloud forest. And so usually we tend to get decent looks at them, but the hearing them is the more powerful experience, and it's a lot of fun to be up there and just hear that chorus start before dawn with these eerie whistles off in the distance. The other Chat-Tanager, we don't have the eastern up here, but the western is fairly common up here. Sometimes it can be hard to get a look at, but we tend to usually get pretty decent looks. There's a lot of them up here, so we've got a lot of chances. It's a quite common bird, but they are also pretty skulky. I don't know if people paid attention to the first one, the very slight plumage differences. It's all kind of around the eye with kind of the markings. The eastern has some more kind of yellow markings around its eye, whereas this one is more plain around that area with just that little yellow mark in between its eye and its bill. On to the warblers, which are in that family with the palm tanagers. So one of our endemic to Hispaniola families. So the green tail, this one is the more common one, and it's fairly likely that we'll have seen this already by now, but not always. This last tour we didn't see him at all until we got up here to Zapoten, but they're quite common in mixed flocks up here. It's one that you'll see at dawn, and then you'll see 20 of them over the course of the morning. They're just everywhere. And then the less common of the two warblers is the white-winged warbler. tough, as you can see, to get a decent photo of it, but they also kind of have a little bit of a greenish back, like the green-tailed warbler, but they have some very obvious white markings on the wing, a little bit darker, kind of browny gray in the head. And these guys are also a common kind of component of mixed flocks up in this cloud forest area, just usually a little bit less abundant and a little more skulky. But they're there. We always see them. So not one that I worry about or anything. And then this is the last one, and this the bay-breasted cuckoo. These guys are sometimes these guys can be ghosts, and we'll go by the end of the tour, after 3 days of hearing bay-breasted cuckoo playback, it'll be the soundtrack of your nightmares, because if you're lucky, you get to see one the first day, because they can be down in the scrub forests. Recently, we've been seeing them more commonly higher up in these, like in Zapoten, in these montane kind of cloud forest areas. So they have a fairly wide habitat range, but they're endangered, as you can see, and they seem to be becoming less common in certain places, possibly due to drought in the lower those lower scrub forests. It's hard to say, but this can be one of the most difficult birds on tour. And I still think I've gotten it 3 out of 4 times. I think there was one where we missed it. But this tends to be one of the ones that you miss if you're going to miss one, and which is sad, because they're beautiful birds, and they have a really interesting vocalization. But it's one we put a huge amount of effort into, and I'd still say there's a good chance that you'll get it, but you just have to be prepared to endure a lot of trial and error before actually seeing one. But this picture was from my first trip down there, and it was, I mean, quite literally, and you always do this. We're like, okay, we're gonna do one more stop, and then we have to get back to Santo Domingo. And then 20 minutes later, it's like, okay, one more. This is definitely the last one. But this was definitely the last stop, and where we absolutely did not have any more time, and we had to make this the last stop. And we got super lucky, and this bird came right in, and we got spectacular looks at it. And that's just how it goes. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got. That covers the vast majority, if not all, of the 33 endemics. So, this is a Dominican Republic. It's a great place to come. I mean, it's one of my favorite Caribbean islands. It's just beautiful, beautiful scenery, great people, great food. The birds are awesome, even if they can be somewhat difficult to see. But we do generally have pretty good photography opportunities for most of these birds. Some of these took me 4 trips to get good photos of, but some I just get good photos of every time. So it's a trip that I would highly recommend. It can be a little strenuous, but it's an adventure. So in closing, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure, and hope to see some of you folks on future Dominican Republic tours, whether it's with me or somebody else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bobby. We really appreciate yeah, you taking the time to put that all together for us and really showcase the Dominican Republic. I think certainly got a very good feel for all the spectacular birds that can be found there, and some of the habitat types, and even the places that we stay. So you really went into some nice depth and had a really good feel for what the trip's all about, and yeah, some of the real specialties that are around. And obviously, those endemic families are quite something as well. So there are a few questions that have come through. I'll just take a little
Sure.
time and run through those, maybe. Yeah, one of the questions was around just, yeah, photography in general, just folks saying, wow, you've got so many incredible photos. The photo ops must be quite decent, but I mean, I guess you've touched on that already to some degree. But yeah, it definitely seems like a place with some pretty good photo opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I say generally it's a pretty good photo tour. I mean, there's no feeders, which can make things difficult, but like I said, it's a lot of road birding, so we're often in pretty open areas where, we don't have to be jostling for position on a small trail to get a bird. And I mean, even just that first day in the botanical garden, you
Mm,
can have good opportunities for, like, the black crowned palm tanagers tend to be pretty pretty tame there, and the lizard cuckoos, stuff like that, tend to be, I've almost every tour I get a good picture of a lizard cuckoo. The toadies, especially the broad-billed toady, is generally pretty easy to get decent photos of.
Yeah.
Warblers also. Yeah, I would say, and I mean at the like the place with the Quail-Dove. I mean, this was my first this past tour was my first time at the where I actually got good looks at the Quail-Doves there, but I got great photos of both the white-fronted Quail-Dove and ruddy Quail-Dove. If
Mm,
people have to be prepared to sit for a very long time and wait and endure a little bit of discomfort and leg cramps and stuff. Maybe not, but it's but yeah, it's I'd say it's a pretty decent tour for photography, generally
mm.
speaking.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Ian was just asking here, is it possible? It's got a couple of questions actually. Is it possible with Rock Jumper to combine Dominican Republic with Cuba?
Yeah, it depends on usually the Caribbean tours are set up as a series,
Yeah.
so it varies depending on the season. I mean, I think we usually do a string of tours in November and then a string of tours in sort of January, February, and they're almost always, I mean, sometimes one or the other doesn't run, but yeah, they're always set up as such so that there's kind of a Cuba, Dominican, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, or some combination of those. So typically, yes, that is the case.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Yeah, yeah, Ian, absolutely. We always, as Bobby said, we run it as a string of trips, so you can always sort of combine. Anybody that wants to head over, you just want to do a week in the country, then that's fine. But if you want to string them all together, like Bobby was saying, then you can do a whole string and cover a whole bunch of the Great Antillean Islands. Um, sorry, Ian's other question was around the Hispaniolan endemics. Are there any Hispaniolan endemics that can't be seen in the Dominican Republic?
Yes, the gray crowned palm tanager. I think I briefly mentioned at the beginning. That is the only one. I mean, it's possible that somewhere way up in the mountains there's an extant population of them, in mountains that nobody goes to because it seems to get pretty close to the border there. But on our tour, it's no, you can't really get it. I think Rock Jumper used to do a little short extension into Haiti back when it was safe to go there, but that is definitely not the case now. So sadly, that one is off the list for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Desiree was asking how many species are typically seen on the trip and how many days is the typical trip?
So it's what is it? It's about, I mean, it's technically a 9-day tour with the first day being the arrival day. So it's basically an eight day, I guess more like seven actually, 7 solid days of birding with kind of a, night in Santo Domingo on either end. Um, and then on my tours, it's anywhere between about 120 and 100, I think 136 was my high count on a tour, that's about as high as you can generally expect. I mean, if you get really lucky with warblers or other kind of weird migrant or something, you might be able to get higher than that. I'd say 140 would be pretty high up there. But yeah,
Yeah.
130-ish is roughly what I would hope for on a tour, and that's kind of depends on how many shorebirds and stuff you get. And the last
Mm,
few tours we've had bad luck with some of these, like I was saying, that Cabo Rojo area where they're just trashing the place with this new hotel complex. It's just way harder to get to the areas where we used to get a couple extra ducks and shorebirds and waders and things like
yeah.
that. So, but yeah, 120 to 135 is about the range.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I just had a look at our stats here on the side, Bobby, just to, you know, just for some fun, giggles. And yeah, I mean, across, if I look at 17 trips worth of data here, you're 100%. I mean, the average trip total is 126. So exactly what you were saying. So yeah, it's pretty
Yeah, so
good.
one of the higher total for Caribbean islands. I would say
Yeah.
Cuba's maybe a little bit higher, but Dominican is definitely the second. It's hard to get into that range, and certainly in Jamaica with our tour and in Puerto Rico as well. It's pretty tough to get up into that range. So
Mm, mm, absolutely. Do you ever see spotted rail on the trip?
I have not. I think so. There is a place I believe for that. It's there's kind of a big inland lake. The name is escaping me right now, but sometimes I know on past tours, I think it maybe mentions this in the tour overview. itinerary that we might have time to stop at this lake and look for this, that, and the other thing. And that is a place where we could see that. It's just the way the tour works out. We don't really usually have time to do that stop. Usually, like I said, some of these endemics can be pretty tough. And if we get really lucky and get some of them early in the tour and then have a little bit more time in those last couple days and where we don't have to just like get everything at Zapoten, then, we might have time to do that on the way back. And the other thing, not to get too in the weeds here, but oftentimes due to weather, we have to, usually the Zapoten day is scheduled for a little, like the first night in Duvergé. So we get that out of the way, then we just kind of have a mellow day of birding the lowlands the last day. But oftentimes on the tours that I do, we have to do some last minute rescheduling for potential rain, because if we get rained out at Zapoten, we're screwed. We can't. It's just so brutal to get up there. It's like you have to be really strategic about doing that. So oftentimes we end up doing that the last morning, and then we're a little bit pressed for time, and we can't do that stuff. So long story long, no, we don't tend to get that bird, but it's a possibility. It just depending on how the logistics work out.
Yeah, great. What about white-tailed tropic bird? You ever see white-tailed tropic bird on the trip?
Yes, it's kind of maybe a 50-50 proposition, maybe a little bit more than that. So that and this kind of depends on the future of how the Cabo Rojo thing works out, but we usually eat at a little restaurant down the beach in that Cabo Rojo area. There's a little road that goes along through the sort of desert there and ends. It just ends, and there's a big promontory that comes out, and they nest in there. So while we're there, we kind of take out the scope, and we don't get great looks at them. So don't expect good photos. If you want good photos, go to Puerto Rico or Jamaica. But if you just need it for a lifer, yeah, it's a possibility.
Apparently you know this trip pretty well, Bobby. Your 50-50 was pretty much spot on. It's 53%. I just checked the trip. Good stuff. Let's have a look here. Someone's asking as well, is there any concern over the trouble going on in Haiti right now?
Um, outside of like world geopolitical concern, there's not any concern
Yeah.
for us on the tour as far as like day-to-day safety. I wouldn't say. I think that the Dominican Republic there's a pretty high level of alert as far as controlling migrant movement in and out of the country. So like for instance, when we're in Pedernales, which is the town that's right on the border, there's a massive kind of military. I don't know if there's a separation between military and border patrol there, but some sort of essentially military presence or police presence that's there, and not because it's necessarily unsafe on a day-to-day basis, but just to monitor the migrant traffic, because there's lots of legal immigration and back and forth movement on a day-to-day basis, people coming in to do work. But yeah, it's never something I've worried about. I mean, if anything, it's an annoyance because there's a zillion different road stops, like police stops that you have to go through, and usually they just wave you through, but occasionally they see it's a group of white people and they just tell us to keep going. But sometimes they make us open our little carts that we carry in the bag with the luggage and go through some rigmarole, and it's just a pain. But other than that, I wouldn't say there's any direct safety issues that affect us as a group.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, last question here. Phyllis is asking, what time of the year is best, in your opinion? Obviously, we've got a bit of a date range that we offer these trips at, but in your opinion, what time of the year is the best time?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rock Jumper knows what they're doing, and the dates that we typically offer tours are basically set up to maximize species count, and be during the dry season. I think we're looking at kind of November through April is roughly the dry season, and our tours are either in November or February, which kind of maximizes the possibility for the most migrant traffic, because everything is already moved out of North America and sort of settled into its winter range by then. So yeah, I mean, I think I've only done Dominican Republic in February, and I mean, it's good. It's good then. That's all the things are there. All the it seems like, I guess, some things I've read, there's some indication that maybe if you go a little bit later, like if you were planning your own trip, for instance, or wanted to do like a tailor-made or something and didn't care about seeing all of the warblers, you could maybe go a little bit later, like into April, when maybe some of the local birds are engaging in more breeding activity and maybe a little bit more um, just naturally vocal without having to do playback. Then you might have a little bit of easier time seeing certain things. But that's really the only thing I could say there. But I think generally speaking, our tours are set up at good times, and that sort of midwinter period is a really good time to see a lot of birds there. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap. Yeah, so from my side, from Bobby's side, thank you so much, folks, for joining us today. And then just make a note of our next webinar, which is going to be held on the 26th of June. So we're going to be doing one of these a month. 26th of June is going to be the next one. And Paul Varney is going to be taking us across to Asia, and we're going to be visiting northern India, one of my favorite parts of the world. And this area is probably most famous for tiger. The regal cat's definitely going to be featured in the talk, but there's a bunch of other highlights as well. And yeah, it's definitely going to focus on a bunch of the sites that we visit. It's a great place to experience the Himalayas, vast wetlands around Barakpur, and tiger reserves as well, like Ranthambore, which are world famous. And many other stunning attractions as well in that area, Fatehpur Sikri, and obviously the famous Taj Mahal as well. So yeah, join us for that one. It's bound to be yeah, a very rewarding webinar, I've no doubt. It's an area we've been to and enjoyed a lot in the past. And yeah, some spectacular photos and scenery. And India is just a real salt on the senses, really, in every single way. And yeah, just I love that part of the world. So do join us for that one. And yeah, on that note, we'll end things off. Let's say thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. All right, goodbye, everyone.
thanks everyone. Take care. Good birding.